Okay, let us begin. Welcome to Life Reimagined, Pirke Abot, Chapter 5, Mishnah 19. Today's class is dedicated in the Refuah Shlema of Robert Yeshaya ben Chana by his grandmother Silvana Mander. Should be Be'ezat Hashem for Refuah Shlema, Refuat HaNefesh, Refuat HaGuf. The Mishnah teaches us, Kol mi sheyesh bo shelosha dvarim halalu. Anyone that has these three things, these three traits, hu mitalmidav shel Avraham Avinu. They are of the students of Avraham, our forefather. We'll get to them. Ushlosha dvarim acherim, and if they have three other things, three other traits, hu mitalmidav shel Bil'am Arasha. He or she is of the students of Bil'am, the wicked one. Talmidav shel Avraham Avinu, as requested. The student of Avraham Avinu is whom? A person who has ayin tova, has a good eye, v'ruach nimucha, pay close attention to these words, and a spirit which is, can someone translate the word nimucha? Low, right? Something which is namuch, okay, low. V'nefesh shefela, and a soul, so a spirit which is low. V'nefesh, and a soul which is shafel. What does shafel mean?
It says humble.
Huh?
It says humble.
It says humble, yes. I see how we translated it, yes. We use the word dust in association with the word shafel.
Maybe like insignificant.
Huh? Insignificant is a good word. So as an example, we say about people that are low, that are downtrodden, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu raises them up. And we use the word umashpil geim. And God takes those that are arrogant and He is mashpil them. So He makes them low. So shafel means someone who is, no, not necessarily to fall, but cast down, downcast. Literally, mashpil geim, which we say every day in tefillah, means someone who is downcast. So their soul is downcast. These are not words that are positive words in 2021, are they? Or 2022? That was so last year, 2021. Okay, yes? We're going to cover all of them, but we need time to compare and contrast. Okay? Talmidav shel Bil'am Harasha, the students of Bil'am Harasha. Who are they? Ayin ra'ah, person who has a bad eye. Ruach gvoha, and a spirit which is gavoa, high. Okay? V'nefesh rechava, and a soul which is wide. Now, if we were to do the odd one out, or we were to play a game of compare and contrast, we were to ask you for davar v'hipucho, a thing and its opposite. The opposite of ruach nemucha, a spirit which is low, is ruach gvoa, something which is high. What would the opposite of nefesh rechava mean? What's the opposite in Hebrew of wide? Narrow. How do you say narrow in Hebrew? Tsar. Kol ha'olam kulo. Gesher. Tsar me'od. It's a narrow bridge. So why is it that it's nefesh shefela and nefesh rechava? Why are those a thing and its opposite? We'll have to understand exactly why this is the case. We'll come back to it. Now, I'd like to address, before we learn anything more about the students of Bil'am and Avraham, I'd like to just for 1 second address the fact that we are, in fact, called the students of Avraham Avinu. Now, I know it's a wild thing to think, but here I am in an era of Uber, in an era of Instagram and Instacart, in an era of instant oatmeal. I'll never forget, there was this Russian Jewish comic. I don't remember his name. Yaakov something. But he had the greatest line. He talked about how in Russia things were so hard to do. They were so hard. And he says, and he's walking in the supermarket and he sees, chocolate powder, and he sees vanilla powder, and he sees all these different powders. Everything is instant. He's so amazed. He finally walks down one aisle and he sees baby powder. And he says, perfect, I'm making my family tonight. Right? So, fascinating, right? Yaakov Smirnov? There you go, that's what it was. I'll never forget it. He goes, I'm making my family tonight, okay? Now, what's brilliant is that we live in this era of such advancement where you have such beautiful leaps and bounds away from the past, away from history. And if perhaps you've grown in a class or in your education or in your midot development, you might consider yourself a student of Rabbi Farhi, a student of Rebbetzin Jungreis, a student of, Chacham Ovadia Yosef, or Chacham Baruch Ben Chaim, or one of the greats of your generation, a student of whomever. I haven't heard someone say to me recently, I learned from my rabbi, Avraham Avinu. I've never heard anyone say that. Do you consider yourself a student of Avraham when you do something which is humble? Or when you see someone with an ayin tova, with a good eye? Now, what's fascinating to me is that actually we should. In science, when there is a new theory which is put forth, or a new comet which is discovered, we refer to Halley's Comet. We refer to Newtonian physics. We refer to Aristotelian thought processes. Those things, they are named after the person that first came up with the theory, with the methodology, with the scientific principle. And these ideas are attributed even today to Einstein, even though we are far and away removed from Einstein's original principles. But E equals MC squared, if it resulted in nuclear fission, then today we call that, we blame that, we credit Einstein with those ideas. Who was the one that taught the world about Ayin Tovah? Avraham. So it is Abrahamian. I don't even know how you would say that, right? Maybe Abrahamic or Abrahamic principles. It is an Abrahamic philosophy. Now, we think of ourselves as Jews as being very different to our Muslim cousins. And perhaps partially the reason for that is because we see their proclivity towards violence in various iterations and factions amongst extremist Muslim ideology. You don't see that, at least not as widespread with Jewish people. So we like to think of ourselves as being very different. But if one was to look carefully, you might find that there are a lot of similarities between Judaic and Judeo-Christian and Judeo-Islamic values. And those ideas are actually espoused by Abrahamic principles. They are espoused by Torah-driven ideas. So when someone who is Muslim is welcoming someone into their home, and they're asking them to partake in their meal, and they are sharing their food, or they are giving tzedakah, and it is called zakat. Where is that coming from? It was not invented. It was not invented by Muhammad. They would maybe perhaps like to believe it was, but it was not. Those were principles that pre-existed their prophet back in the Middle Ages. Or the ideas for welcoming someone into their home. Where did those principles come from? Where did Ishmael learn those principles? He grew up in the house of Abraham. So this idea that the forerunner, the forebearer, the initiator of an idea becomes its teacher, its master, is something that we find across disciplines. And therefore, when these similarities exist across disciplines that got it from one person, it behooves us to look at those things and recognize that that is attributable to Avraham Avinu. When we talk about the great masters of tefillah of the past, and now we find prayer being a part of a huge portion of the world's persona, the idea that you can pray to someone, the idea that someone who is an addict reaches out to and gives themselves over to a power greater than themselves. That is a recognition of a higher power. Where did that thought process come from? That is Abrahamic. He was alone as a monotheist in a polytheistic world, in a pagan world. So when you see someone today who is not Jewish, not Christian, not Muslim, they are of no religious denomination, but they have a chip in their pocket, and they have a sponsor, and they go to a meeting on a Thursday night in a church backyard, or in a fire station, or in a local JCC, and they iterate as part of their 12 steps that they believe they submit to a higher power. That is Talmidav Shel Avraham Avinu. Why do I draw and why do I place such emphasis on this? Because in many ways, there are people who will in their own lives introduce an idea or a concept or a way of doing something where ultimately that concept will be borrowed by others. Who is the forerunner of soup kitchens? Sorry? Abraham. But in our day, who made soup kitchens popular? Sorry? Sorry? No. Salvation Army. So anyone that thinks of the word soup kitchen, where'd they get it from? Salvation Army. Now, if that's the case, if you think to yourself that there are things that I could introduce, that I could bring, that others would copy, that's a really beautiful thing. Someone said to me the other day, Rabbi, I know that you are doing this, giving the gift of warmth in the synagogue here for the last 3 years. I saw that there's another organization that's also giving out gloves and scarves and this and that. You should tell them it's your program, that it's really, it's really not nice what they're doing. They should really. And I was like, what is the downside of more freezing cold people having gloves? This is not about us, or about our name, or about our brand. This is about a hungry person or a cold person, getting what they need to stay alive. The minute it becomes about your persona or your brand, or you're going to issue a cease and desist because someone is helping people in your neighborhood, it's stopped being about the poor person, and it is really all about some sort of feeding of one's ego. So let's take a look now at this Mishnah again with some fresh eyes. You have these three things. Make no mistake, you are a very distant student of Avraham Avinu. And one of the joys that I've had in my life, I love to read. I only wish I had more time. I know it sounds really funny, but there's an introvert hiding underneath my extrovert. If I told you I was an introvert, how many of you would believe me? And I don't think I am an introvert exclusively or underneath my extroversion.
I got that.
But I am also an introvert. And people who know me, who see me work, will tell you that I am hyper-focused to the point sometimes that they'll call my name 5 times and I will not hear them because I'm in the middle of reading, or I'm in the middle of studying, or I'm in the middle of sending an email, and it's literally, I am just not there. And there are times when my phone is buzzing, and I'm not looking, I'm not desperate for that human interaction. I can lose myself in a world of ideas, or books, or thinking, or thoughts. So, one of the great joys of my life in reading is discovering a rabbi or a rebbitzin that after they've died, I will adopt them as one of my teachers, as a role model. I don't know if you've ever had that before. My favorite example for this was with Rav Shlomo Freifeld. I picked up his book 18 years after he died, and I read his life story. If you want to get the book, it's amazing. It's called Reb Shlomo. It was given to me actually by Rabbi Orlowek as a gift. I couldn't put it down. I was amazed. And I learned so much from him, and I made him one of my rabbis, one of my role models. And I kind of feel like, in a certain way, when we are conscious of the fact that we've learned this from this person, they live in this world in 2022 through an action that we've done. I find that exhilarating. That I'm doing something, and Avraham Avinu is here with me. And I don't hesitate, by the way. When I'm trying to do something and I'm aware from whom I've learned it and whom I'm trying to emulate, I don't hesitate to ask Avraham Avinu for help. Not that he has any power other than God. That's idol worship. But to ask Avraham to intercede on my behalf. I would like to have 50 guests for Shabbat. Can't afford to do it. Hashem, please help me find the funds to be able to have 50 people for Shabbat. Avraham Avinu, go bug Hashem for me. I don't maybe have the merit, but you do. Go get me that. And time again, I have seen Siyata Dishmaya, help from heaven come by eliciting the power and the zechut of the great person I've learned it from. I'm giving you trade secrets here. Okay? And this is only one area. Avraham Avinu is one phase. But from this Mishnah, we learn this concept of what it means to embody a principle, an idea of some great tzaddik or tzaddiket from generations gone by, and borrowing the strength of that tzaddik or tzaddiket. Can I give you an example? Let's say someone is trying to help someone give birth, or with an issue with fertility. Maybe they're working on someone in their own family, trying to encourage them to go through what can be a difficult and invasive process, the process of fertility. Maybe they're trying to raise money for a stranger or a family member who's trying to go through with it, and it's very expensive. You could do that on your own if you want. Or you could ask for the help of Yocheved and Miriam, who were the first people who focused on bringing children, babies, into the world against all odds. And asking in Shamayim for Moshe Rabbeinu's mom, Yocheved, Amram's wife, the mother of Miriam, Aharon, and Moshe, asking Miriam HaNevi'ah in Shamayim and saying, I'm trying to bring life to this child. What does it say about these two mothers of the Jewish people? Vatichayenna et hayeladim. And they brought life to these children. ask them to intercede in Shamayim and pray on the behalf of the success of your mission. So number one, who are you a student of? Who did you learn from? What does Abraham's student embody? Ayin Tovah. They have a good eye. What does a good eye mean to you guys?
See the good in everyone.
Sorry?
See the good in everyone.
To see the good in everyone. Where do we find Avraham Avinu seeing the good in everyone?
Sodom.
Sorry?
Sodom.
Sodom, great example. Avram hears that Sodom is going to be destroyed for their cruelty, specifically their cruelty towards guests, which is his favorite mitzvah in the whole world. And Avraham still prays for them. Hachnasar orchim, right? They were unwilling to invite anybody. What else? Where else do we see Avraham's good eye? Because I want to draw a distinction in what Leah just said, but in just a minute. Sorry?
With Lot.
What do you mean?
That he wanted to save Lot, even though Lot was bad.
He wanted to save Lot even though Lot was bad. Okay?
Maybe when he said to his wife Sarah that she's beautiful, something like that.
Now I know that you're so beautiful. Ayin Tovah, it's very interesting. I like that. New idea.
How about Ishmael and Hagar?
Excellent. Sarah says, chase him away. Look, he can't be here. He's hurting Yitzchak. And Avraham, he keeps pushing that away. He doesn't want to. He only can see perhaps the best in Ishmael until God himself says, this is part of the plan. Sarah's actually right. You need to do this. There's one bit that I think you're missing, and I want to draw the distinction between, I'm going to leave yours on the side for a minute, because yours is a little bit of a different caliber, okay? But we'll come back to it. Sodom, what does Avram say? He sees the good. But the good that Avram sees is not in the people of Sodom themselves. He says maybe there are, sprinkled in with all the jerks, a limited number of really good people. Save everybody on their behalf. So his Ayin Tovah there is not in the everyman, it's in the tzaddikim who live amongst the everyman. Avram deciding to see good in Lot. Maybe that's just Avram saying, Anashim achim anachnu. It's a familial connection. His seeing good in Yishmael might only be the feelings that a father sees in his own son or in his own wife in Hagar. There's one moment where we see Avraham does something very specific. Listen to this. Avram says, come into my home, virachatzu raglechem, and rinse your feet. I've gone to many homes and they'll ask me very nicely to take off my shoes. And it's not something I don't understand. Initially when I first came here, I didn't understand it at all. And now, all I can see is poop and urine all over the streets of Manhattan, because these dogs are everywhere and they need to mark their territory everywhere. So do you want that walking around your house? I actually get it in Manhattan. Okay? But they ask you to take your shoes off. Abraham was not asking them in the desert to take off their shoes because he didn't want sand in his house. He had sand in his house too. What was it? Huh? They used to worship the dust of their feet. So Abraham was welcoming them into his home, and he was asking them to rinse the idol worship, off of their feet. That means that who was he inviting in for dinner? Idol worshippers. Now, one could argue that's all there was. There was only idol worshippers at the time. Everyone who was not a monotheist, i.e. Avram and his dear wife, was the other thing, which was an idol worshipper. But Abraham saw within the idol worshipper the potential to not be an idol worshiper. And he saw their erroneous beliefs as something that with a little bit of water could be washed off. Our rabbis tell us that water all throughout the Torah is a euphemism for Torah. And Ma'im Ela Torah. That's why the person that would give Torah to the Jewish people would be a person who had been saved, who had been drawn from water. The deliverer of Torah, his name is Min Hamayim Mishitihu. I drew him from the water. There's an association between water and Torah. Avram looked at an idol worshiper and didn't see someone who was evil. He saw someone who was ignorant. When Avram says the people of Sodom should be saved because maybe there's a couple of righteous people mixed in amongst them, what Avram was saying is not save the city for the sake of the 10, but he was saying maybe the 10 can turn the city. Got it? And that's why Avram doesn't say save all of Sodom for one person. He says 50, 40, 35, 30, 20, 10. Hashem agrees with them all the way down. But once it gets less than 10, Avram stops bargaining. Why doesn't Avram say 1? The answer is that Avram was never asking to save them in his merit. What Avram was saying is, maybe this person, these people, can change the city. But Avram understood that one person was not enough to cover all of the 5 cities of Sodom, Amorah, Admah, Zvoim, all the Sar, all the cities that needed someone to change them. So he asked for the minimum that each city would need. For 10 tzaddikim, divided by 5 cities, they needed at least 2 in each city. Because a person cannot do something alone. Okay? Now, when we look at this Ayin Tovah, I think what we're seeing here is something amazing. You know, the national anthem of the Jewish people is Hatikva. Not the national religious anthem of the Jewish people, that's Shema. But the national anthem of Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael is Hatikva. Now, I always thought it was interesting to pay attention to the words there. Kol od balevav penima nefesh Yehudi homia. So long as there is in the heart of a Jewish person, right? Kol od balevav nefesh Yehudi homia, right? What is there in that heart? Sorry? What is in that heart? Nefesh Yehudi ho. Right? So, what is in that heart? So long as there's a Jew out there, right? What is there? Od lo avda tikvatenu. Hatikva bat shnot alpaim. Right? Liot am chofshi be'aretz. Right? To be, we have one thing in our heart. What is the one thing? Hope. Most people don't realize that hope, this idea, that this tikva in the soul of a Jew, it comes from somewhere. Where does it come from? Ayin Tovah. You see, we associate Ayin Tovah, a good eye, when you look at someone, like they're good. Oh, but you know what? They're really doing really bad things. No, you know what? There's still good in them. But Ayin Tovah is not just on people. It's also on things. It's also on our future. You have people who are cynical about the world that we live in, about the societies that we're in, about the cultures that we're in. But you cannot be a student of Avraham and not believe that there will one day be a brighter tomorrow, because then you don't have an Ayin Tovah on time, on humanity. You have to believe that the worst person has the possibility of becoming, once again, something beautiful. Now, why is it that Avraham has this unbelievable Ayin Tovah? And the answer is because Avraham is someone whose unique nature came about based on his deep faith in God. Now, this is so interesting to me because when you compare and contrast, usually you don't compare and contrast something which is so obviously different that it doesn't need to be compared and contrasted. So as an example, if someone was trying to help you tell the difference between a circle and an oval, that would make sense. You don't compare two things that have nothing in common whatsoever, because the difference between them is obvious. Why would we compare and contrast Avraham and Bilam? Surely it would be more appropriate to compare Avraham and Yitzchak. But the Mishnah doesn't do that. It compares Avraham and Bilam. And the answer is actually, I think, something really surprising. I think the answer is that Avraham and Bilam actually shared something in common that requires, that behooves us to perhaps draw the distinction between them. Bilam famously refers to himself with a very interesting line. What does he call himself? Ne'um ha'gever shetum ha'ayin. The speech of the man who's blinded or who is closed of eye. Bilam is a person who only sees through one eye. What was his power, Bilam? He only had one power. His only power was to curse. He could not give a beracha. And I always thought it was so interesting. You know, Balak hires Bilam, and Bilam repeatedly tries to curse the Jewish people. It doesn't work. Why does not Balak ask Bilam to just bless his nation? Right? Bilam's like, I can't curse them. Ma'ekov lo kava'el. How could I curse a people that God has not cursed? No problem. Just bless us. You know what the answer is? Balak was aware of Bilam's secret. He had no power to bless. When people would come to him for a blessing, how would Bilam bless them? By cursing the competition. That's what he did. So if Jeff Bezos comes to Bilam and says, I want to be the first person into space travel, what does Bilam do? He says, no problem. I'm going to give you a beracha that you should be the first person into space travel. Then he'd go into his room and he would curse NASA, and he would curse SpaceX, and he would curse, sorry? That's SpaceX. He would curse, right? He would curse everybody else in the field. Who's the lone standing, option? He is. Bilam was a person who could see only through one eye. He only saw the evil. He only saw the failings. And his unique power was his ability to be able to see something in such a negative way that he could then present it to Shamayim, to God, and say, look at how bad this person is. Surely they deserve sickness, desperation, sadness, being alone, having no positive, outcomes. And faced with the stark presentation of Bilam in the court of Shamayim, those curses would be carried out from on high. What's amazing is if you notice that Bilam, he looks at the Jewish people and he can't curse them. So what does he do? He moves to a mountain to see the Jewish people from another perspective. And then he tries seeing not the whole of the Jewish people, but efes katzehu, but a part of it. He keeps trying to find an angle, a perspective of negativity. For indeed, when a person looks at the negative in a person, they are seeing an angle, a perspective, a side, but not the whole story. Bilam's incredible power was his unique ability to focus and hyper-focus through one eye only. Avram was the same, except that one of them was Ayin Ra'ah, and one of them was Ayin Tovah, but they were the same. It's so interesting that Avraham wakes up in the morning early. Vayashkem Avraham baboker, vayachavosh et chamoro, and he saddles his donkey. Who else wakes up early in the morning and saddles his own donkey, even though he's got servants to do that for him? Bilam. Same expression by the two of them. Who else has an angel call out to them by name? Avram, Bilam. Fascinating. They both go up to mountaintops. They both do a korban at the top of a mountaintop. But how radically different they are with their single-minded vision or single-minded focus in attempting to see something negative. Isn't that fascinating? I think maybe the Mishnah is actually telling us something far deeper than what you might have originally thought. I think maybe what the Mishnah is telling you is that there isn't an Ayin Benoni. You know what the hardest thing to find in 2022 is? How often do you meet someone who's really balanced? Who has a really nuanced perspective on any hot button topic? It's hard to find. The Mishnah is saying here, on a certain level, every one of us has a single-eyed process of vision. Maybe not in all areas of our life, perhaps specifically or most vividly expressed in an area in which we are passionate about. So Avraham, as an example, where is his single eye focused on? It's in the area of chesed, of reaching out to someone, of helping them. In the thing that you are most passionate about, you only see one perspective. Bilam, in the same way. In something that really means a lot to you, it is very difficult to see through any other eye other than your own. And I always love this idea. The Mishnah is actually saying, you have two choices. This one or this one. There are no other choices. I remember a while ago, we were giving a class, an optional class that you could choose, either my class or the other class. Okay? And we called the class Jewish philosophy. Now, for teenagers, if I tried to come up with a drier terminology or name for the class than Jewish philosophy, I would probably be hard-pressed to come up with a worse title. But 100% of the students chose our class. And I asked the teacher afterwards, I was like, the principal, I was like, there were two options offered. The other one sounds like a good class. I gave mine, because I was the newcomer, I gave it like a really bland title. I wanted people only who were really interested in learning to join our class. But everyone came to our class. What is so bad about this other teacher that no one is choosing their class? What's going on there? And he said something to me which I'll remember till this day. He said, they all know this teacher. They've had him many, many times before. And a lot of the students don't like that he has a very negative perspective on anything that he does not agree with.
That he does not what?
That he does not agree with. And what the students are doing to 100% is rejecting negativity. I kind of imagine us like those students. You have two classes you can choose from and you have to choose one. Ayin Tova or Ayin Ra'ah. Which is it going to be? Because again, I feel like you either actively choose Ayin Tova again and again and again, consciously, with intention, you choose to see kindly, you choose to see expansively, you choose to see hope, or, you know what happens? Life steals your Ayin Tova from you. We were holding a meeting a while back with some different people in the community. And I was talking to a group. And I was asking them, what do they think was necessary, in New York City for the Jewish scene to get more involved? It wasn't specifically about any ages, and the young people had these ideas and these ideas and these ideas. And there were some older people in the room and they're like, that's not gonna work, that's not gonna work, that's not gonna work, that's not gonna work. And as everything that they brought up was poo-pooed by these two other people in the meeting, you could see that they were getting more and more frustrated. And finally, one of the young people says, why did you even come to the meeting if you're just going to say that, oh, this is going to work? It's not going to work. That's not going to work. No, nobody wants that. People don't like that. That's not what people are into. That's too silly. That's too stupid. That's not fun enough. That's not cool enough. Why did you come? Why did you come to the meeting? And this person who was a little bit older than these young said, you know what? You'll be just like me when you get to my age. I was also like you when I was younger. You ever heard someone say that? Or some version of that?
Yes.
What is this conflation between age and cynicism? Between age and a lack of hope? Between age and a lack of flexibility? Some people will say, experience, rubbish. Some of you might remember there was an amazing woman who came to this synagogue. She's passed away. Her name was Rosalie. When she came here, she was over 100, wasn't she? Well, she was nearly 100. What was the birthday cake that they bought her? Was it her 98th birthday or something? Remember in the video there was a birthday cake? She was a Holocaust survivor. She'd had the worst things happen to her. Her baby was killed by the Nazis. Like just the type of person that you think will curl up into a ball and die. Willingly. The type of person who is cynical, the type of person who's withdrawn. But at like 96 years old, or whatever. She was off in Alaska, snow sledding with dogs. She decided to write a book with all of her wisdom. She decided to learn how to go dancing, do ballroom dancing. Right? This is a woman that was so full of vitality and of life. And she wasn't always that way. There was one morning where she woke up and said, I could either live my life in the dark, or I could live my life like the sun is shining. So we stand in a corridor with two doors, one of it that says Avraham on it, one of it that says Bilam. Cynical, exploitative, manipulative. Which door do we want to go through? If you want Ayin Tovah, it's an active choice. Not just an act of choice, it's an active choice. It needs to be something that's constantly refreshed. Because you know what? That older guy, he was right. Age can mean cynicism, but it doesn't have to. It just does unless you fight it off. The Mishnah tells us that Avraham has a ruach nemucha, a spirit which is low, and a soul which is humble. What's the difference between a spirit and a soul? Why don't you just say those words twice? He has a humble and low, or a short, right? Soul. What's the difference? Isn't ruach and neshama the same thing? No. What's the difference? Educate us.
Everyone has ruach, but not neshama. Neshama is something, I think, it's like connected to your faith to God, the relationship with God. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but this is what I think.
Everyone has a neshama.
Yeah, even non-Jewish?
Even non-Jewish.
That is opposite the ruach, but not neshama.
I don't know what anyone else holds. I have a Mishnah in Avot that says, right? I have a Mishnah in Avot that says it. So the Mishnah in Avot seems to say, right, that Chaviv Adam shenivra b'tzelem. Praiseworthy is man, for he is created in the image of God. Chavivin Yisrael shenikru banim lamakom, which means that when you said Chaviv Adam, you were not only talking about Yisrael. So this idea of being created in God's image, which is the idea of a soul, right, applies to everybody. Now there might be a neshama, a soul which is Jewish, but just a soul, every human being has. And my proof for that, sorry?
Everyone has ruach, or is there?
Everyone has ruach.
So everyone has ruach and also neshama, so...
Everyone has nefesh, ruach, and neshama. But I did not mention in the Mishnah the word neshama. Take a look again. It says ruach and nefesh. Now naran, which is the abbreviation, naran, nefesh, ruach, neshama, refers to three levels. Nefesh is the lowest level of soul. Let's call it perhaps the lowest component of soul. Ruach is the second component of the soul. Neshama is the third component of the soul. Those three comprise the soul of every human being. Are there opinions that disagree with me? Yes, there are. Okay? However, there's two higher levels that we're not going to go into. Those are called chaya and yechida. Okay? We're not going to talk about those for today. But I want to share with you the words of the Nefesh HaChaim. The Nefesh HaChaim writes that the way a person understands naran can be understood through the mashal of a glass blower. If you've ever seen in outside of Venice, where they blow the glass the way that they did back in the day on the island of Murano, you'll see that they are still blowing glass in the traditional way. They're taking the sand, they're heating it up until it is a glowing red, almost gel or liquid. They let it cool a little so it gets a little bit of stiffness. They hold it at the end of this long pipe, and the middle of the pipe is hollow. And then they blow through the pipe, and the air enters into the glass, and it starts to open the glass up. And then they spin this little pipe, and as they spin, the glass, which is not liquid, it's got this viscosity to it. So it starts to spin, and the centrifugal motion of the spinning of the pipe forces the shape into a uniform circle, and it starts to make what could be a cup or a vase or whatever the case might be. And then they can obviously do wondrous things with the glass, like you might see in the hands of an expert in Murano. Now, the Nefesh HaChaim explains, the Nefesh is the air that occupies the space in the molten glass. It's that which gives shape. It's that which gives form and purpose, if you will, to the glass. That's the lowest part of the soul. It's the soul that animates this vessel, the vessel called the human body. That nefesh level, we share nefesh even with animals. Okay? You find the word nefesh associated with animals in the Torah. Ki hadam hu hanefesh, it says about eating blood. Okay? So, nefesh is the animating soul, the electricity, the power, the consciousness that is in every living, breathing thing. Okay? Ruach is the air, he says, the spirit, the wind in the pipe. It can alternately be understood as the connection between this, the air in the vessel, the soul in the human, and their connection to Shamayim. Nishama, it shares its root with the word nishima, which means to breathe, is, so to speak, the air in the mouth and the lungs of the glass blower. Who's the glass blower? Hashem. And the way the Nefesh HaChaim explains it is the neshama does not exist in the human. It doesn't even exist in this world. The neshama is the top component of your soul, and that stays in the heaven. And that's why the neshama is something that is incorruptible. You don't have it to get it dirty. You can corrupt your nefesh. You can even corrupt your ruach, because the lowest level is in contact with the bottom of this pipe, if you will. But you cannot make or render your soul's source, the neshama, you can't make that impure. It is from that place that true teshuvah emanates, because that place has never been sullied. It's never been made unclean. Is this clear? So the Mishnah over here differentiates between ruach nemucha and nefesh shfela, which I thought was very, very interesting. So we're learning about Abraham's eye, we're learning about Abraham's ruach, and we're learning about Abraham's nefesh. Now to me, that's a little weird. Why'd you pick 2 out of the 3 and leave the third behind? Why are we not talking about the neshama here? Good answer. Answer number 1. Next possible answer. Let's leave that. Park that thought for 1 second.
Maybe the other parts are choice and what you do with what you have versus you are choosing. In the same way that you can make it, you can alter it, you're the one in charge of choosing door number one or one. Versus,
Okay, why wouldn't you mention that?
why wouldn't I mention it?
Why wouldn't you mention that there's that choice? That should be one of the three things. It just doesn't sit right with me that we're describing the essence of Avraham. We talk about his nefesh, we talk about his ruach, but we don't talk about his neshama. That's a little weird. Sorry?
The neshama is the same.
As the ruach and the nefesh?
Yeah, the neshama between Bilam and Abraham are the same. The neshama is pure. It's the same. So they're not comparing it because, like you said.
So there is nothing to talk about when it comes to the neshama.
No, there is. So now,
Okay. Good. We got, yeah?
Is it that the Ruach creates the Neshama, so whatever you do with the Ruach, we already know what the Neshama is going to be. Because of the actions, we know what it's going to be.
You're so close.
Does that make sense?
You're so close. It's like scary how close you are.
Because the neshama
I don't know
is
what
fueled by
it
God.
Huh?
The neshama is fueled by God.
Fueled by God. So, again, shouldn't we say that? Well, let's park this for 1 second. We'll come back to it. Okay? We'll come back to it. And then I want to hear if this is what you mean. I'm not sure what that means, Silvana. Well, you'll explain it. Okay? Ruach Nimucha means that Abraham's spirit was low. That sounds like a horrible thing. A low spirit? Low does not mean unhappy. Low does not mean unhappy. We associate low with bad and high with good. But low can be great and high can be terrible. Hello, cholesterol. Right? What does it mean that Abraham's ruach was namuch? Think for 1 second about the mashal that I gave you from the Nefesh HaChaim. Where is the ruach? In the? Nope, that's the neshama. Nope, that's the nefesh. Only one left. There's the air in the mouth, in the lungs of God, so to speak. There's the air in the vessel. And then there's the air in the pipe. Avram's ruach was nemucha because there was not so much space. Namuch means short. There was not so much space from the glass blower to the vessel. There was not so much space between heaven and earth when it came to Avraham. Because what had Avraham done? He'd shortened the space between earth and heaven. Bilam's pipe was hella long. The distance between heaven and earth for Bilam was so far. I want to share with you something wild. We read about Avraham and Bilam both, right, rising up early in the morning and saddling their donkey. Our rabbis explain that the word chamor is also a euphemism. Chamor is the same letters as the word chomer. What is chomer? Chomer means material. It means physicality. Avram saddles his chomer, his physicality. He wakes up early in the morning. He knows exactly what he wants to do. Now please excuse the indelicacy of what comes next. Bilam and Avraham both ride their donkey. Avraham rides his donkey on the way to the Akedah. Bil'am, the pasuk says, after he hits the donkey, finally the donkey's mouth is opened, and the donkey says to Bil'am, Halo anochi, am I not atonecha, your donkey, asher rachafta alai, that you have ridden on me? The Gemara explains that he was intimate with his donkey, that he practiced bestiality. Both of them have an interaction with the chamor, with chomer, with the physical world. Avram takes the physical world, and what does he do? He gives it away. He uses physicality for spirituality. Bilam is the opposite. He uses all of the physical world only for his own, literally bestial pleasures. He's someone who is obsessed with the crudest form. Avram sees in everything a possibility for spirituality, and Bilam sees in everything a possibility for physicality. Wild. Remember that single-minded determination? That single eye? So whereas Avraham has a nefesh shefela, it's something that everybody, it is low. Avraham allows everyone to step all over him. He welcomes them using him for their achnasat orchim needs, for their prayers, for everything. Bil'am has a nefesh rechava. He is insatiable. It is wide. It takes everything. Now listen to this. I asked you why we didn't mention the neshama, and the answer is because we did. Ayin, the eye of Avraham, and the eye of Bil'am is the conversation about the neshama. You see, I mentioned to you earlier that the neshama is incorruptible. It's the part of the being which is in the heavens. You can't corrupt it. Avram's ability to look at a rasha and see possibility comes from his understanding of the neshama. His ability to look at Sodom and think that the right people, given the right tools, can change these people. That comes from Abraham's neshama. That is his neshama tova. Whereas Bil'am has an ayin ra'ah. But I asked you earlier, I told you earlier that you couldn't corrupt your neshama. So how did Bil'am corrupt his neshama? How did he do that? How? Huh?
Maybe the further he got away from
What I can hear?
He didn't corrupt his neshama. He just cut himself off of it. Imagine a patient who's connected to an oxygen machine that will help them breathe for the rest of their life. They will need to be intubated, but they will breathe for the rest of their life. They will be aware, they will be alive, they will be able to interact with their family, and everything is perfect, and the machine can never fail. And so long as it's plugged in and it has a backup generator and a backup generator and a backup generator, and they will live and they will breathe from this machine forever until they take a scissors and cut the pipe. So this pure neshama that they have access to, they always have access until they remove themselves by making their ruach so gvoah, their nefesh so rechava, that they've lost the access point and they cannot find their way back to their...
get back to it.
Yes, they could. You have to find it though. And it's not so easy to find at that level. Yes?
My question is, if we believe, which we do as Jews, that morality comes from God, God establishes what is morality through the Torah. If somebody is like Bilam, or even Mitzrayim, we're reading now every Shabbat about Mitzrayim, when you have nations like the Umot of Canaan, if they don't have the Torah, they don't have a recognition. They were educated in paganism. They were educated, like you're saying, Bilam practiced bestiality. Where were these people supposed to get morality from? Why would we expect them to behave otherwise?
Excellent question. The irony is that the answer to your question is this. Why does Bilam have this line to God that he most clearly does not deserve? The Talmud says in Avodah Zarah that God said when the nations would come at the end of time and he would ask who studied the Torah and who followed in my ways, and the Jews would come to collect their reward, the nations of the world would come and say, where's ours? And God would say, well, you didn't practice what you should have done. You didn't do the mitzvot. You didn't follow in the right way. Then they would say, had we had a prophet like Moses, a prophet like Moshe, we too would have done the right thing. So God says, okay, I gave you a prophet like Moses. His name was Bilam. And you see, you didn't follow in my ways. Now the question is glaring. Bilam's like Moshe? Yep. Remember, at his core, Bilam had the tools to be a completely focused, single-minded tzaddik of the caliber of Moshe or of Abraham. But the nations of the world themselves, the playground of the nations of the world, was a world that honored and respected only money, only desire. So God said, I'm going to give you what I gave them. But in their society, they nurtured this. Before I gave them Moshe, they nurtured goodness. They nurtured kindness. They nurtured morality. So when the prophet came along, in those environments, in that mindset, he was able to rise to a level that he could bring the entire people with him to a tremendous level. But Bilam, given the same tools, the same level of prophecy, the same possible connection to God, he grew up in your world. And you taught him with your magazine covers and your awards who you respected and what you respected. So he grew up to be a beautiful version of you. Fascinating that the name of Bilam is literally the letters Bet Lamed Ayin Mem, which means Bal Am. Bal means a bit like mixed up. Balbel. Balbelioto. Mixed up. Bal-am. He was born into a mixed up nation. So what did he do with his unbelievable power? He Lord Actoned it. He absolute power turned into absolute corruption. The Mishnah ends and says, Talmidav shel Avraham Avinu, the students of Avraham, ochlim ba'olam hazeh, they merit to enjoy this world. V'nochalim le'olam haba, and they inherit an even greater portion in the world to come. Shne'emar lahanchil ohava yesh. Hashem says, I give as an inheritance to those who love me something which will exist forever. V'otzorotehem, and their treasure houses, amaleh, I will fill. Aval talmidav shel Bilam harasha, but the students of Bilam, yorshim gehinam, they inherit the other place. V'yordim lebe'er shachat, and they descend to the bottom of the pit. Shne'emar ve'ata Elohim toridem lebe'er shachat, you will lower them to the bottom of this pit. Anshed damim, men of bloodshed, umirma, and trickery. Lo yechetzu yemehem. Anshe damim means men of bloodshed. But damim can mean bloodshed, blood, and damim can also mean money. Men who are obsessed with physical wealth, with acquiring things. Lo yechetzu yemehem. They will not even have half of their days. Va'ani eftach bach. Bil'am lived to the ripe old age of 32. An age of a person, the lifespan of a person. We learn in Tehillim, it says the lifespan of a person is 70 years. Half of 70 is 35. Bil'am lo yechetzu yemehen. They don't even live to half of their life. But this idea is not only in actual years lived, it's also refers to another element. The Gemara says, En Adam met. A person does not die v'chatzi ta'avato biyado, with half of his desires in this world fulfilled. A person who lives with an insatiable desire for more and more and more of what he wants, of his hedonistic proclivities. If that's how he lives his life, lo yechetzu yemehem. They live their life never having acquired half of what their days they feel could have or should have brought them. There's one last element as well. And I always say that half a person's life is lived in the daytime, and half of a person's life is lived in the nighttime. The nighttime represents a time of darkness, a time when it's difficult to see. But half of a person's lifetime is lived in the day, during a time of sight, where you can see, when you understand. Light is associated with reason. It's why the age, a time where people did not study, they could not read, is referred to as the Dark Ages. A time when 99.9% of the population of Earth was illiterate. What the Mishnah here is telling us is, Lo yechetzu yemehen. A person who lives this way doesn't ever experience moments of light, of inspiration. They live their whole life in the dark. They never get to experience the other half of life. Most of us live a life with times of light and times of dark. Times when we're really proud of ourselves, and times when we're not so proud. Times when we are growing, and times when we're learning from our mistakes. But a person like Bil'am lives in perpetual darkness, both in this world and the next. They live in this single focus, this single eye, a time where everything and everyone is dark and black and nefarious and notorious. Avram is zocheh from this element of neshama. He's zocheh to see a spark there, even when it's incredibly difficult to see. We should be students of Abraham.
Amen.
Hashem should bless us always in our life to emulate His beautiful ways and to be a source of light even to people who cannot see it. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.